Welcome to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast,
bringing you the innovative new ways of the cattle industry.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth and Paul Hayes. Together, we're going to be interviewing leaders within the cattle industry.
Here on this podcast, our focus is honoring God and innovating the cattle industry. Get ready to listen, learn, and laugh as we help innovate the cattle industry.
Let's get innovating. Have you been looking for a place to buy top quality AI sire semen or collect a bull of your own? Well, look no further than Elgin Breeding Services. Located in Elgin, Texas, Elgin Breeding Service is not only one of the best breeding services in the business, but also has superior customer service. Contact them at ebsbull@elginbreedingservices.com or by phone at 512-285-2019. Again, that's 512-285-2019. And visit their website at elginbreedingservice.com. Happy New Year's! It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and as always, joining me today is my other host, Paul Hayes. Are you interested in the farm-to-table process, or do you really know what happens when you send your steers to a harvesting plant? Well, in this interview, we dive into the meat and processing industry, how to manage a cattle herd with the end goal of a branded beef program, and how to start your own branded beef program. Here to talk to us about these topics is Mr. Cameron Barton. He is the Vice President of Operations at BRK Meats and has his own branded beef program. How's it going, Mr. Barton?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me on, Baxter and Paul. It's an honor. I've been keeping up with you guys and what you're doing. Love the podcast, and I'm glad to be on.
We're glad to have you on.
Very.
And we've been wanting to get somebody on that has their own branded beef program because we think that's something. It's something that's been happening for a few years now, but it's still definitely something that's new in the cattle industry and mainly the beef industry. But Paul, will you take us away with our icebreaker questions?
Absolutely. With your own branded beef program, I'm sure you love to eat your own steak. So how do you like your steak? Just to see.
Yeah, well, number one, just to be funny, I like it cooked a little bit. But no, I do like it medium rare. My wife likes it a little more well done. But of course, my favorite, I think, is the ribeye, as a lot of other people's is. But yeah, medium rare all the way, no matter what it is.
Absolutely. That's just perfect for me.
Yeah.
Like you said, some people like it a little bit more, but that's the way I like it too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then what's your favorite place you have visited before?
So in 2012, I was at A&M as a student there, and I was in a finance course. We went to Europe for 12 days. And it was a study abroad. I went to France, Italy, and Switzerland. Those were definitely the most interesting and beautiful places I've been to, probably. And so there's a lot of different things to see, and just beautiful place. I enjoyed it.
That's neat. That's really neat.
That's really cool. I think the whole study abroad and college thing is really cool. You have to go all over the world studying. That's really cool.
It definitely was a eye opener just to see how different they live there and do things, and so actually I didn't want to leave. Actually, I thought about going back there at one point, but just found opportunity here, so I stayed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know you listen to our podcast, and so I'm sure you know that we have some questions we like to ask everybody, and we've kind of shortened that list. But we do have those questions we like to ask everybody before we start the interview. So our first question for you is, will you tell us about the events in your life that have helped shape you to who you are today?
Yeah. So probably like you guys a little bit. I grew up on a farm and ranch where my dad was involved and still is involved in cattle operation and chicken operation. So just around farming and agriculture from the beginning. And so that had a lot to do with, all the way from the way I was raised to uh, work ethic to, you know, agriculture, learning about it day in and day out. And whether I wanted to or not, that's kind of what I was around for the most part of my life. And then went to high school, of course, here in Garrison, Texas, where we live now, and went on to Texas A&M. That was a big, another culture shock for me, but very educational time in my life. Met a lot of great people there. Uh, did a lot of different networking and got a great education too. So that was a big part. And then just through the workforce, I worked for different people. Obviously, I worked for my dad and cattle operation, and one of the uh, interest or a very big growth part of my life came. I went to work at 44 Farms. They're a big Angus operation. Actually, they're number one in Texas, and I think number 3 or 4 in the country. And got to just dive deep in there and learn a lot about genetics and the Angus business and just a lot of different, especially on the beef side. And that's really where I really became interested in what I'm doing now. The more I learned about the genetics and what makes good beef, and at 44 Farms, I really felt a calling to come back home and try to do some different things here. So those probably were, and then just going back and as a young guy, obviously I probably should have said this number one, but my faith in God, and that's definitely, I know you guys are not ashamed of that for sure, and I really respect and appreciate that. Before the podcast, even having a prayer, and that's obviously that's been number one in my life, to just look back and see how God has just orchestrated my life and to see where He's leading me now. But those are some key events uh, that I would say, and then just being married and having kids of my own, 2 boys. Those are those things change your life and for the better. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
That's great. And obviously salvation is definitely very important. And you talked about working at 44 Farms. That's I we went Paul and I were at a camp that was there this summer, and it was great, and we do hope to have a guest from there on eventually here. But that's just something I wanted to share, Paul.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And along with the 44 Farms, you had mentioned you kind of learned what makes good cattle there, which kind of leads me what I was going to ask you next. What selection traits are important in managing your herd and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did learn a lot about that there. I think, we they look a lot at 44 especially, but looking at the EPDs of animals and all the way from birth weights to weaning weights to calving ease to how a cow performs in the winter, how a bull performs in the winter, how they hold up through heat and winter, and all those different things are very important. And then, as you know, in East Texas, I believe we have some of the best grazing land in the world, and just what kind of cattle do good, uh, in the summer. And but data is very important. That's something that 44 Farms takes really. I think that's what's gotten them to the place they're at, is keeping up with all that information, have that information readily available, and then just not only doing the homework but executing. Right, you have to execute at a high level and be able to pick out those great cows and great bulls, and you start culling the ones you don't want, and just kind of raising the standard of the herd you have, whether that's Brahman or Angus or Hereford, whatever it is. But all those things are very important.
Have you been looking for Brahman cattle with a good genetic background? Contact 79 Cattle Company, selling reliable Brahman replacement heifers, Brahman show prospects, and Brahman bulls. Contact Taylor Tate at 210-241-4511. Again, that's 210-241-4511. Or contact Mallory Tate at 210-861-0155. 210-861-0155. Well, I think it's time we start to get to the, I guess you could say, in this case, the meat of the interview. Pun completely intended. I just thought of that. Anyways, so, growing up in the beef cattle industry, you said you raised cattle your whole life, correct? And
Correct,
so
yeah.
what you work at BRK Meats as the operation of, or vice president of operations. So what encouraged you to enter the processing industry?
Well, I think it was, I think those life events that I was talking about led to that, but I just became very intrigued with, once I went from cattle to beef and just kind of entered that world a little bit, I just became very intrigued to want to learn the whole process. And I just thought that, as a consumer, even as a employee, the more I knew, the more valuable I would be, but also the more value I could bring into sales or to a consumer. And the more information you can gather, the more valuable you can be in that industry. But definitely just, I remember slaughtering my first animal and just being like, wow, I really want to know what this takes, what's all a part of this animal. You just, we know it's beef, but what all cuts are there? And then from there, it just grew into wanting to get more into it. So that's kind of how I got into it.
That's interesting. So we talked about how you work at a harvesting plant, but as VP of operations, what does your day-to-day work entail?
Oh man, it's from can to cane almost. It's just every day is different. That's really what I love about it. But a lot of it is it's kind of making sure that the supply chain is where we want it to be, and balancing the supply chain with the demand of beef that we have. So making sure that, hey, the slaughter plant is bringing in the correct amount of animals each day, and then on the back end, as you know, we have a processing plant in Carthage. So making sure that when we take that animal from the slaughter plant and go through the further processing plant, making sure there's a place to go with that beef. So it's lining up, everything in between from those stages of the meat to making sure we have the right customers to take this amount of beef that we're producing, and then just, managing the people that we work with and making sure they're in the correct positions to execute at a high level, like we talked about earlier. And so it's kind of all over the board, really, but that's what I love about it.
All right.
That's really nice. And y'all's BRK harvesting plant is a USDA inspected plant, right?
Yes, sir.
So what is it? What is a harvesting plant like? What does it take for it to become a full-time USDA inspected plant?
Yeah, so it's an application process, and USDA really it connects you basically to a lot more consumers out there. So it takes a little bit more risk in that application process, and of course you've got to have it's a little bit more uh, strenuous regulations, and a little uh, better equipment that you need, and just it's really just a higher standard of processing because like a state inspected, that's not USDA. You can only uh, sell that meat within the state of Texas. When you have a USDA label, that meat can go anywhere in the country. So there's a little bit more regulation to it, and a little bit higher standard.
Absolutely. That's the reason why USDA inspects it, and I know it's difficult to become a USDA inspected plant, so I'm sure that helps drive profit for y'all. So we've talked around this question a lot, but let's just jump to the point. Will you explain the process of harvesting cattle?
Yeah. So we have there, like at our plant in Tenaha, we've got a holding pen area, and so starting at 7 in the morning, we've got trailers backing up to the pens. They'll unload, and then by 7:30, we're slaughtering the first animal. But um, our system is set up. We slaughter it outside in a chute, and then we were able to pull it inside where we dehide it. So we take the hide off, take the head off, the organs. The organs are inspected. That's a vital inspection point for USDA to say that this animal is safe for consumption or not. They'll look at the liver and kidneys and things like that, make sure those are still good, and then we'll split the carcass into two halves, and those two halves will then go into another part of the facility, which is the hanging cooler, and that they'll hang in there for at least 24 hours to get down to about 40 degrees temperature, which is a chill temperature. And then for us, that's when we're able to, unless people want to hang in longer than that, we can then take it to our processing facility and start cutting it up into steaks and ground beef and jerky and all sorts of things.
Thank you. I know that's not something that everybody knows. I mean, the majority of the people in the cattle industry do kind of have a pretty good idea what happens, but I do just like to give a better idea of what happens in y'all's specific plant. If you truly want your livestock to perform at their best, make sure to contact Vance Aaron, the owner and operator of AFL Livestock Solutions. Vance specializes in magnawave treatments that use pulsed electromagnetic fields, or PEMF, to relieve pain, swelling, and inflammation, caused to help your livestock feel their best. In addition to livestock, Vance can also help you feel better. His treatment works great on sore muscles and joints, along with other mobility issues. His treatments are FDA approved to treat migraines. Aaron Family Livestock Solutions has helped many exhibitors make it to the backdrop with their proven MagnaWave treatments. Don't miss your next backdrop picture. Give Vance a call at 903-720-3184. Again, that's 903-720-3184. Or find them on Facebook at AFL Livestock Solutions. So we will talk about your branded beef program, but before we start with that, I'm sure that to have a successful branded beef program, you have to manage your cattle herd well. So that's what we would like to go ahead and discuss. How do you breed your cattle to not only produce a larger portion of meat, but also higher quality meat?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I just want to say for everybody, I think it's different just for what market they want to be in, and I'm never want to say, hey, you should do Angus or you should do Hereford, and I mean, I think you guys do Brahman, and I know Mr. Benny very well. Your dad was a awesome ag teacher of mine in high school, so he taught me a lot of things. And but just for me personally, I've been involved in the Angus operation for almost all my life. So speaking to that, we've just like we kind of started out this episode talking about studying those EPDs and tracking bull genetics, and we've got some local producers of bulls, that Angus bulls, that we really link into, and we watch them, we talk to them, we see what bulls they have coming up and coming available, and as far as cow herds go, just managing them, making sure that the cows are producing quality calves each year, and when they're not, it's time to cull those cows, and see if we can do something different with them. If they're not producing, make sure we're replacing those, and uh, keeping the cow herd strong, and then a feeding program that works. Um, I know for a branded beef program, you get into a feeding program that you can really take. I think we're doing something that we're taking that animal from birth all the way to the end. So we're feeding it all the way out, and then so you really have to hone in on the mixed ration, and average daily gains, and what you're feeding them each day, and so all of that's really important into a branded beef program.
Right, and I mean, that's something. Even you said y'all manage them all the way through. Have you noticed? I don't know if y'all have done the just selling them before, but do you know if that changes your profit any? If that
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you this year what we see, and not just us, but really most everybody. That cattle prices are really high this year. So a lot of people are selling those calves uh, before they really start to feed them out, because they're seeing that they can make just as much money selling them early as they would holding on to them and spending more money to put into them. So that is a challenge, when you start a branded beef program. Is you kind of have to be committed to it. You have to decide that this is what we're going to do, even when you go through the hard parts. And but it's also you can also link up with this. This is where it really gets interesting, in my opinion. Is you can also link up with producers that do this, producing those same quality animals, and um, sometimes we've bought their calves before, uh, that go into the same branded beef program, because they had the same genetics, and are doing really the same thing. They're just not feeding them out. So with that branded beef program, you can then buy local producer calves, and keep it going, and they have a place to market their cattle.
right? Okay, that's good. We're still talking about your herd. Do you have an outlet for cattle that don't fit into your branded beef program? Or I know this is the case with a lot of people. Is your branded beef program the outlet for cattle that may not fit directly into your breeding specific part of your herd?
Yeah, good question. It's yes to both of those. So cattle that don't fit the mold, I guess you'd say, uh, we we can either go two places with them. Uh, we kind of have some tier programs in the branded beef program. As you know, there's uh, grades of beef: prime, choice, select. So if something doesn't fit the prime bill, it's maybe it's the choice or the select, and there's still consumers out there that want, they'll pay the price for those different grades, and it's still good beef. And then there's other cattle that'll just go straight to market. They'll just go straight to harvest. And sometimes you just realize they're kind of at the end of their life, where they're in economics you learn about, it's where they call that decreasing. They kind of hit their peak, and now they're starting to go backwards on you. So that's kind of when
Right.
diminishing returns. That's what I was thinking about, a point of diminishing return. So that animal is no longer giving you peak production. It's time to go ahead and harvest that animal and turn it into beef. So those are the two options, really.
So
That
what
that
are
makes sense.
what's the about the standard for your herd to where you like draw the line of it where it's going?
Yeah, so for ours, it would be, as far as grade, we like to look at choice and higher. If it doesn't meet that, and usually we can tell that from the the phenotype of the animal, the animal as it's as we're feeding it out. Over the years, we've seen that, okay, this certain animal is going to probably going to grade choice or higher, and this one's not. And a lot of that has to do with genetics, but sometimes they don't feed out as good as you thought they would. And you're kind of ready to get them off the feed bill too. You're tired of putting money in them. So, but that's kind of the standard we look at: choice and higher grade. If they don't meet that, then we go ahead and cut them off a feed and harvest them. Still good beef. It's still get all the same things, just a little lower quality of beef.
Well, I'm glad that we talked about how to raise a herd that's goal is for a branded beef program. But I think now it's time that we can actually start talking about your branded beef program.
Yeah.
So I just like to know how long have you had your branded beef program? When did you start it?
Well, it was my dad's just kind of came up with the idea, um, and it really started through he was feeding cattle for feedlots, and these feedlots only wanted, they were very specific on what they wanted. And so let's say you got 100 head, and there were 80 that the feedlots wanted, and then the 20 head, they said, well, you can do something else with those. We don't want them. Nothing wrong with them, nothing bad about them. This specific feedlot wanted a specific animal. And so basically from there, you have to decide, okay, what are we going to do with these other 20 head, right? So that's kind of where the idea came from, is hey, maybe we can market these other 20 on our own, and we can start, developing a feed ration, feed them out, sell our own beef. And that's kind of where the idea originated. That was my dad's idea, but him and my brother are really the main partners in that. I do help them when I can, but the VP of operations, BRK Meats, really takes a lot of my time. So that's I've been blessed to still be able to harvest, be on the processing end of harvesting my brother and dad's cattle. So that's really fun to still be able to work together there.
All right.
Absolutely. And you'd say that's kind of what encouraged you to sell your own beef? Was your dad starting that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just I think just from early on as a boy. I mean, just y'all's age, really. I just kind of had it in my blood. I think, I even there were times I tried to get away from it, but this is what I love to do. So
Why do you think the farm to table is so important?
Well, especially now, it's always been important, but I do link this back to Christianity a little bit, our faith, but we've gotten so disconnected and so far away from our roots. Uh, just even in an agricultural standpoint, uh, you know, we start hearing more consumers, hey, I wonder where this meat really comes from, and they've heard all the commotion and rants about bigger companies and you know importing beef and where is it really coming from, and so this is a huge opportunity right now. So I think it's very important right now that we are able to return and get back to being close to the consumer, and really they're really opening their eyes now to, oh hey, Mr. Barton over there raises cows, or Mr. Whitworth raises cows. Uh, I want to eat their beef because they're right here, and I want to know where it comes from. I know they work hard and raise good animals, so why not support them? And I just think that's becoming more and more important.
EP Cattle Company. Owned by Eddie Wilson, EP Cattle Company is home of Sir Rao's Handshake. Rao's Handshake is a sound-structured, heavy-muscle bull that is really bold-ribbed, so it comes with no surprise that he is a Fort Worth and San Antonio Junior Show Division Champion and Rio Grande Valley Open Show Division Champion. He is a grandson of BRC Noble and JDH Shank Manso, and is also a great-grandson of Mr. H. Elijah Manso. You can contact Eddie Wilson or Nicole Wilson on Facebook at EP Cattle Company. So remember, if you're looking for some well-performing registered Brahman genetics, contact Eddie Wilson on Facebook.
So, setting up a farm to table or a branded beef program is something that I've definitely thought of, and that's something I really want to do in the future. And I'm sure there's probably listeners that we have that want to do that as well. So, I would like to ask you to explain the process of starting your own branded beef program.
I think the first piece of advice I would say is just to, number one, find someone who's already doing that, right, and uh, ask them questions. I mean, just like we're doing right now. I think that's very important, um, and that's really what intrigued me about you guys is you're kind of just setting that stage, um, and allowing people to talk to you and you talk to them. And I think it's just starting a conversation with those people and learning from each other. So I think that's a big first step. But then number two, and probably what you'll learn from the people you talk to is, you got to start putting into the practical things. You have to have some land, and probably yeah, that includes probably a banker and just being real practical. Land and some cattle, and but seek out some people who are really doing it every day, and you'll see that those people are probably in tune with the genetics, the feed, the the daily operations, what it really takes to do it, um, and but those are the first practical things, and then it's finding that market that you would like. At BRK Meats, we see all kinds of producers. There's some that are grass fed. There's grain fed. Uh, we get some people that are trying to do organic. That's a very hard market, but if you can do it, it's very rewarding. And so it's all about what you kind of want out of it, and that determines what you put into it, right? So it's but yeah, it's learning from each other, and I would even say, there are so many people we come across at the processing plant that, oh, they figure out that this guy's doing Angus, uh, and because of that, maybe there's a niche market over here for a Brahmin or Hereford, and so just having those conversations with different people and seeing which market would fit you.
Right. So if you were the person that someone was wanting to ask more questions to, is there anything else that you would say? I know niche market was something you just said that was pretty big, but is there anything else?
Probably be find a great support team, great people good people to work with, that believe in the same things you do, because it's going to take a lot of, just kind of being real. It's going to take some blood, sweat, and tears, and you want to have people that are in the same boat with you, that are they're going to rock with you and roll with you and come back the next day and do it again. And that's something I really get to be a part of at BRK Meets. Is it really starts with every morning we come in, we kind of all, one way or another, it may be a quick little hoorah moment, but it's hey, it's a new day, we're here for a reason, and it's making sure we're all on the same page and ready to do again, and we kind of see the why behind it. We believe that we're this is bigger than ourselves, and that's what I would say is find those group of people, to whether those are employees or customers or family members. Just really dig down deep with those people.
Nice.
How do you advertise your beef program, and what would you tell people on how to advertise their farm to table program?
So a big thing is social media, obviously, and just like you guys, I think it's taken every opportunity to, whether it's jumping on a podcast or getting on, putting it out on Facebook, social media, Instagram, and then I word of mouth is still, in my opinion, the greatest form of marketing. The more you can talk about it, the better. And hey, you have to realize that not everybody's going to be interested in your product. That's okay, and it's kind of like, I kind of refer to, I love sports, so with my team I always refer to some sports illustrations. I think it was Michael Jordan that said he missed more shots than he made. That didn't make him a bad basketball player. I don't think we would say. He was still one of the greats. And so when you go out there and you talk about your product, no matter what it is, just know that there may be times you'll miss more than you make, and that's okay, because some of the the makes may be a really big make. Yeah, that's what I would encourage most folks.
Hi guys, I'm your co-host Paul Hayes, and I'd like to tell you all about my family business that has been going on for over 50 years now, and that is raising quality registered Brahmin cattle. Our ranch is called Flat Rock Brahmins, and we have locations in Glen Rose and LaGrange, Texas. And we are here for all of your cattle needs. Whether it's needing show cattle, replacement females, or even a new herd sire, we would be happy to earn your business and watch our genetics excel in your herd. You can contact me by email at paulhayesv@icloud.com, or my dad, who helps manage the ranch, at paulhayesiv@icloud.com, or over the phone at 817-964-2752.
I'm going to have to cover for Paul real quick. We are going to go ahead and start wrapping up. But before we do that, actually, I did want to ask you, and you do not have to answer this question. I didn't tell you about this question, but I just kind of thought of it. Do you want to say anything about the four main packers?
No, I would. It's first I would say there's a bad connotation, right, that people have about the big four. But also I would say, being in the industry and pretty much all my life, I do think we need, big companies. That it takes a lot to feed the world, and
Right.
and we are hungry human beings. So that's a practical way to put it, I think. But also for me and our team at BRK Meats, it's also um, a competitive game. It's an opportunity to be unique. It's an opportunity to look at the big four and what they're not doing, and then for us to say, hey, we're willing to go put the work in and be different and connect closer to the consumer and be able to do different things for the consumer that the big four is not willing to do. And so I don't really like to shed negative light on anybody. But at the same time, I also would encourage anybody I can to come see us before them. uh, we feel like we're more unique and have a huge opportunity for growth. Uh, and our team even kind of jokes about it, but not really. We want to be the big five, but we want to be different. So
Absolutely. We ask this question to everybody that comes on our podcast, and it's kind of our staple question. What advice would you give to ranchers to help innovate their herd for the better?
that's a really good question. Um, I think I learned this more at 44 Farms than anywhere, but keep up with all the information you possibly can, and that's and I mean I haven't done that, but I'm doing more and more of that at BRK Meats. I find myself just because to be better at my job, I just have to continue learning. Um, and it's realizing that you don't know everything. I don't know everything, and to be better, you have to kind of humble yourself, and you know, and for me, I would say that's keeping up with all the data. That's from when I look at our herd, it's uh, anything from grass production to death loss to uh, like we was talking earlier about productive cows to non-productive cows. There's a million things to keep up with through the day to day that when you're able to look back at that information, you'll see uh, opportunities to change or grow from, learn from, and then or do different. Just as much information as just be a sponge.
Continuing to learn kind of seems to be a trend on our podcast, but thank you for that. That was great. And we do kind of seem to be getting that trend, and I like it. So at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned your salvation, and another question we like to ask everybody is, what is your favorite Bible verse?
Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for man." Me and my right hand guy at BRK Meats, we state that every day because it's easy to lose sight of what lose sight of why you do something. You kind of get into the day to day and the routine and the stresses of life and stresses of work and trying to make things work and trying to make people work. And so, yeah, it's realizing that, especially as a Christian, that, hey, there's more to my job. There's more to my life than just me. And I mean, honestly, it even really works in business, right? When you take that approach, you you kind of run into opportunities that way. It seems like, and but that's just been a key verse in my life and one I've really grown from.
That's great. Well, I guess, is there any questions you would like to ask us? Anything else you'd like to say that you didn't get to say?
I think maybe a crazy question, but I got this fly that keeps bothering me. But anyway, what would be if you could get just one guest on here? Who do you think it would? Like a wild and crazy guest, maybe.
What define
Who
wild and crazy?
well, not why, but just who would be a guest that you would like to be on the podcast?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of people we're trying to get on the podcast. I will say a new person that we're gonna try and get on our podcast eventually is the new I guess appointee, the person that was newly appointed to Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. That is someone we would like to get on our podcast, and then
Nice.
there's other people that we would soon like to get on our podcast as well.
Yeah.
Before
Awesome.
we go, can you tell people where they could, if they're interested in your beef or BRK meats, where they could find you or where they could find your beef or get in touch with BRK meats?
Yeah, it's so on Facebook. We're primarily on Facebook. It's just BRK Meats. You can contact us by phone. That phone number is 903-693-6122. And feel free to reach out to me at my email is cam at brkmeats.com. We welcome anybody to come. We'd love for you to come tour the facility, the harvest plant, or the processing facility in Carthage. And so we really want people to feel at home, and we want them to learn about us as much as possible, and we want to learn about them. So, hopefully we can help each other.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I don't know what happened to Paul. He just I think his computer had to restart, and I don't think he ever got back on. But thank you for joining us. I've certainly learned a lot processing and how to get into the branded beef industry and program. Don't forget, everybody that's listening, you can now watch the podcast on YouTube. It has all of our episodes plus some extra content. You can subscribe there as well. And on Facebook, you can get updates and follow us there as well. And then you can join our email list to stay up to date on new episodes coming out. There should be a link in the description below, and then on any of the social medias we should have the survey to join the email list. And of course, you can email me at bbwtopnotchcattle@gmail.com. Make sure to follow this podcast on the streaming service of your choice. Anyways, so I think, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I just want to say thanks to you and Paul for having me on. And anytime I talk to you, I would say tell your dad hello. He was a vital part in my life, and whether he knows that or not, I want him to know that. And I enjoyed having him as an ag teacher, and I'm just glad y'all had this podcast. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to following you guys all the way.
Oh, yes, sir. Sounds good, and we enjoyed it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us, and keep everybody listening. Keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off. Hello, guys. Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. We want to make this podcast better. So if you would, please like this episode and leave us feedback in the comment section. Something else that helps make this podcast better is when you respond to the polls. So if you're able, please respond to our polls. Help us make this podcast as good as possible. Thank you, God bless, and have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth.
I'm your co-host, Paul Hayes. Remember our key verse, Proverbs 16:3.
Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans.
Thank you for listening.